Meeting of Mayor and Council for the purpose of discussing a possible non-binding referendum on the November ballot whether a municipal judge should be elected or appointed. We have a quorum. The mayor is absent and excused. Councilman Jerry Orleans is absent and excused. We are awaiting the exact wording of the motion that was made and seconded at the meeting Monday evening, August 26th. The motion was made by Councilman Eigelhart and seconded by Councilman DiPolito to have this meeting, and I think we're going to get the exact wording of that since it's not exactly as is written on the call. Is this the official call? Or as it's written on the agenda? In any case, we'll get that momentarily. So the referendum in November would be on November 4th, coinciding with the municipal election. Is it November 4th? I'm sorry. 5th, November 5th, which would coincide with the municipal election, which has already been agreed to with Fulton County, and that sum of monies that we will pay to Fulton County has been established and will not vary with anything else put on that ballot. The deadline asking for a question to be placed on that ballot is Tuesday, September 3rd. So today's meeting was called on August 25th in order to comply with that deadline.
Called on the 26th.
I'm sorry, on the 26th. Today is the 28th. At a regular council meeting, and it was passed unanimously that we have this meeting today. Just as a little background history, our municipal judge of, I believe, nearly 33 years resigned on August 5th before the end of his term, which is set to expire on December 31st, 2015. In our charter, we have a mechanism for replacing that judge. To fill that void, currently we have standby judges, and from all reports this is working well but is not a long-term solution. By our charter, we are required to call for a special election within 60 days, and the date for calling that special election is, the deadline for that date is October 4th. Because there is an option in Georgia law to appoint municipal judges, this council has been asked to consider and to determine if we will continue according to our charter, thereby electing our judge, or if we would be interested in petitioning the Georgia General Assembly to change our judge selection process to one process of appointment. So currently, the council can appoint an interim judge and could before the next scheduled election. But because this current charter provides for direct election of our judges, this has been the accepted practice in our city, and whether or not this body would vote to curtail or restrict that is not to be taken lightly. So our quandary is to determine the will of the people in allowing them to continue in this method of selecting their judges, which currently is by election. So to determine if the people want that, we looked at this opportunity to tag on to the November election at no cost to the citizens of Roswell, to put a referendum or question directly to the voters to decide whether or not to maintain the current system of direct election of judges, or whether there might be the will to change it to a system whereby there would be an appointment by mayor and council. The distinction probably is in the ability to remove a judge, because we currently have that authority to remove a judge if they're not performing their duties properly. In the appointed system, the judge would be appointed at the pleasure of mayor and council. Thereby that standard or that bar threshold would be reduced. At this time, I would call for a motion or any comments from council.
I'll jump in, and I think because we've had a lot of discussion about the legal aspects, is it appropriate to ask Mr. Davidson to talk about those things? And he has created an opinion for us, but I think the public should hear what the legal research has been to this point, so that we're all on the same page.
Councilman Aguilar has asked for the opinion of our city attorney.
The opinion on whether you can put the question on the ballot?
Well, the whole aspect of all the different things that we've considered, but yes, that would be the primary concern, I think.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Price is correct. The judge did resign with 2 years left on his term. Currently, the general state law says that at any time the mayor and council, if they deem it in the best interest of the city, can appoint a judge. They would set the compensation, and that judge would serve at the pleasure of mayor and council. The city's charter, which is a local act, which is below a general law of the state, actually says that the city elects a judge. So the council actually has a decision to go either way at this time, but by the charter, the city is required to call for a special election within 60 days. That was what was discussed on Monday night. What came out of Monday night was this meeting regarding asking the voters a non-binding question on whether they would like to have an elected judge or an appointed judge. After looking at this, I had found 2 Attorney General opinions that are directly on point that say the city cannot expend taxpayer funds to have a straw vote. Councilmember Price is correct that Fulton County had said if we put another question on the ballot, that it would not cost the city taxpayers any extra money. However, the city is already paying money to have this election, and therefore it's my opinion, however, council may disagree with me, that the city would be paying to have a straw vote by the fact that they are already paying for the election. And it's going to be a decision of council. It's not my decision. It's mayor and council's decision on how they would like to go on this.
Thank you, Mr. Davison. Mr. DiPolito?
Thank you. With respect to a municipality not having costs for a straw vote, we conduct polls periodically, not on the ballot, but we just go out and ask the public what they think, and Facebook and so forth. Are we technically not allowed to ever go out to the public and ask questions about what they think, if that costs any amount of money?
These opinions directly refer to putting a question on the ballot.
All right, so that is specific, that's ballot specific as far as the straw vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I believe the opinion that our attorney is referencing, although you indicated there were several, but the one that I have received is an unofficial opinion from the Office of the AG, Attorney General in the state of Georgia, and the title of it is whether or not public funds may be expended for the purpose of conducting a straw poll or public opinion referendum absent statute authority. Is it the our attorney tells me that there is another memo I had not seen yet, Shall we take a break while I read it? Maybe I'll just read it out loud. Can we do that? Well, first of all, let's read the first one. Public funds may not be expended for the purpose of conducting a straw poll or public opinion referendum absent statutory authority. And this second one, well, in any case, this just is so lengthy, I don't know that we need to be going into it, but you're giving us your opinion based on this. Is there a distinction then between a binding vote and a non-binding vote?
Yes, there is. However, because the legislature has already authorized the city council, either by charter or by general law, to appoint or have elected a judge of the municipal court, this could not be a binding referendum. So therefore, it would have to be a non-binding referendum or a straw vote, which is addressed in these opinions.
Are you saying that because the result of it could conflict with our charter?
Because the state has already provided for the manner in which a judge will either be elected or appointed, that the straw vote, or this would have to be a non-binding vote because it's already been addressed by the legislature. The matter is there's a local act which says elected. The general law of the state is that the council can appoint.
Okay, so for the purposes of this meeting for which it was called, and we now have the exact wording of the motion by Councilmember Eichelhardt, that a special called meeting on today at 9 a.m. to consider whether or not a special question is placed on the November 13th ballot regarding election or appointment of the judge. So the question before us is whether or not to put a question on the ballot on November 13th. I'm sorry, November 5th. So if that is what our discussion is, does the city attorney have any mechanism for us to move forward with this that he would consider within the law of Georgia?
Not at this time. Based on the Attorney General opinions, which I provided, it's my recommendation that you do not place something on the November ballot as far as a question to the electorate, a non-binding question to the electorate.
And certainly we would regard the opinion of the city attorney with great authority. What would be the consequences if we proceeded against that advice?
It may subject the city to a lawsuit. However, as I've told you previously, I don't really see that happening. However, it is possible, and the state might have something to say about it.
I mean, can you imagine a situation where somebody would sue the city for asking its citizens their opinion?
There's lots of things the city gets sued for that I can't imagine.
So you think
no,
the likelihood of that would be in what percent?
I can't give you a percent.
But unlikely. Unlikely that would be any consequences to us moving ahead with a referendum.
Other than going against the authority of law, which to me is a problem, no.
But these are AG opinions, right? Is it in law?
Based on law, yes, ma'am.
Any further council comments at this time? Councilmember Diamond?
I don't know if this is where we pass the discussion, or are we going to talk about it, but I just wonder if this is the most efficient way to get those opinions. I mean, I think, we're charged with making these decisions, and I think we absolutely want to hear the public's viewpoint on it, but to wait till November and a ballot that might have a third, maybe, of the people voting, and our council mayor races don't often even draw that much. I'd like to find, talk about ways we can get the feedback sooner and more efficiently than, whether we get caught up in this. I just have, I haven't seen the wording suggestions, but I'm interested to see if there's a way we can word it that gives people the information they need to make that decision, so those few people can make that call. I think there's got to be a way. We do this all the time. We get public input, we have hearings, we put it out in the media, we talk about the different things, and I have a whole host of questions if we get to that about how we go about making that decision, but I'm not sure this is our best way to do it, and it seems like a very cumbersome political way to handle a problem that we want serious input on.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. I'll point out that if we go to an appointed system of judges, then we will have 6 or 7 people making that determination as opposed to maybe even a third of the electorate. Mm-hmm. So I think it behooves us to find out what people want to do in this matter, and we do have an absolutely 100% free opportunity to put this to the voters on November 5th. Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. I have concerns about a non-binding referendum for 2 reasons. One, because of the question about the legality of it, but I also am uncomfortable with going to the voters and asking them a question on something of this magnitude, but not having their vote actually count. So if we have a question on the ballot, my opinion is that really needs to be something that we take seriously. I'd be interested to hear other council members whether they'd be interested in putting a binding question on the ballot. And we cannot.
We cannot.
All right, so we can't put a binding question on the ballot.
Because the legislature has already provided the mechanisms for the judge, either by our charter or by general law, you can't put a binding referendum on.
Okay. Well, then that helps answer my question. All right, thank you.
So I guess what we're talking about then is a non-binding referendum, or how they're referring to it as a straw poll. And that's the question, whether or not there is potential for a legal challenge should we put a straw poll at no expense to the taxpayers of Roswell on the November election. Any other comments from council? Mr. DiPolito?
Thank you. I guess just to follow up my comment, I'm not in favor of a non-binding referendum. I agree with Councilmember Diamond. We need a lot of public input on this. I think there needs to be a lot of discussion about the pros and cons of elected versus appointed, and I understand there are a lot of issues on both sides of that. So I think it absolutely requires a lot of discussion, and I'm sure that will be occurring. One thing we hadn't talked about, and it's really beyond the scope of this meeting, but wanted to throw out for people to think about, is the potential of, if we have an elected judge, would we consider having term limits, just as another alternative to whether it's elected or appointed.
Thank you for that comment. I know we've got a full discussion on this topic that was tabled from our meeting Monday evening. I believe it's September, 23rd. A full discussion of this matter, which obviously would be prior to any referendum if there were to be one. Just the same, that discussion will determine the future of whether we remain with our charter and allow the citizens to directly vote their judge, or whether we go to an appointed system. Any other comments from council? I'd like to open it up for public comment. Anybody wish to speak, please approach the microphone and state your name and address, please.
Thank you. Good morning. John Monroe, 9640 Coleman Road here in Roswell. I've just a couple of comments. One on the discussion of the non-binding referendum and the possibility of litigation against the city. I'll inform the mayor and council that I'm an attorney that practices civil rights litigation, which means I sue governments. And if a client came to me and wanted to sue Roswell for the non-binding referendum, I wouldn't see the point in it, especially with the representation of the mayor and council, that it wouldn't cost the city anything. I'm not sure what you'd sue for. There wouldn't be any damages available because a taxpayer couldn't even sue to recover personally funds that the city would spend. But if the city's not going to spend any money, then I don't see what could be accomplished. I suppose if there were a sufficient time, somebody could sue and try to get a temporary injunction to prevent the question from being put on the ballot. But the bottom line is, it would have to be really important to do that, and it's not really that important. I don't see anybody doing that. But then onto the question, the underlying question of the appointment or election of the judge, I just wanted to read to the council a sentence from Federalist number 47, written by James Madison in the debates over ratification of the Constitution. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. What we're talking about doing is going from a system where we have where we have a unified executive and legislative body, the mayor and council, to a system where we essentially have...
Excuse me. Council will listen to the person at the microphone.
To a system where we have no separate judiciary anymore as we do now, where we'd have a unified executive, legislative, and judiciary here in the city, which in essence would be moving to what James Madison defined as tyranny. And I'm not sure why we'd want to move to such a system. That's all the comments I have, Mayor and Council, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else choose to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion. I'm sorry? Council Member Nguyen. I used to wonder why the mayor could never come up with people's names. Now I see why.
Mr. Davidson, could you clarify the three branches of government, federal versus city or local?
Yes, the separation of powers with the three branches of government applies to the federal government. It applies to the state government. It does not apply to a city government. The city government, the governing authority, is the mayor and council. They are the legislative branch. They are the executive branch. There is no branches. It's just one tree. So the council could elect, if they so desired, to not have a municipal court. That doesn't happen in the federal or the state. This is simply, the whole city is a creature of the legislature. And that's all that we're giving. So to say that there's a separation of powers in the city is a fallacy.
Any further comments from council? Excuse me, Councilmember Diamond.
I guess before we go to a vote, I want to reiterate, I think it's very simple to say, it's the American way. We need to have elected everything we can have elected, and that seems like the simple reflex, and it's certainly the instinct that we all follow. But I think there's so much more information here, and I worry that waiting till November to get a straw poll of information is not going to give us the public input at the level that I would want to hear it, and the level that I would like to see. I think we've been looking through the lens of our beloved judge for all these years, and our population has changed. What a person has to do to get elected has changed. The raising of money, I have a ton of questions about what I'm hearing about judges not being able to really campaign, that's been a lot of the reason that, people end up with judges that are real estate attorneys that have no criminal experience, that it becomes a popularity thing instead of someone who's actually qualified. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why every city in Georgia has gone this way but us, and I don't know of anything every city in Georgia agrees on anything. So there's got to be more to this story, and I think we need to look at that and take all that into account. And I just worry that waiting till November and seeing what one question gives us is not the best way to get input and not the best way to find the answer. So I'm not totally against it. I just don't think that's our best way to serve the people.
Any other comments? Mr. Eigelhardt.
I'd say you can call me anything, but I'm afraid to say that. But I agree with a lot of those comments, and when I first made the motion to consider this, I do think it's important for us to get public input, and I think this was one way to do it. But the more I've thought about it, it's so difficult to make a question, and the format has to be on a ballot to make it where it's something I think most people can fully understand. I hope doesn't take that as meaning voters aren't smart enough to figure it out. But there are a lot of things that come through on any ballot in this form that really don't go into the full explanation. And I think we have other mechanisms in which we have to work out on how to do those. But after thinking about it, how do we come up with a question that doesn't skew it one way or another? And I don't know we can do that. So after, again, thinking about it for a while here and talking to a number of people, I think it's probably best not to do this after all, in terms of the ballot question. But clearly we have to do major public information and discussions in the next coming month, I would say, or a month or two. Thank you.
A question I have for our city attorney. When it says that we must call for the election within 60 days, does that mean set a date for an election, or what are the limitations going forward from that 60 days that the election has to actually take place?
I have not been able to find anything where it limits you on the actual time of when you have to set the date for. I'm sure that a judge would say that you couldn't just drag it out till the next election cycle. However, there is, the 60 days is the date for you to set the special election. So at that time, it would be my recommendation, again, to set an election time. The election times are set out by the state right now. The next available one other than November would be March. The next one would be May 20th, I believe, and that's the general primary, which, again, would save the city money if you elected to go to that date. I would not recommend going any further out than that.
Thank you. Now, the March date for an election is definitely going to be held, or possibly would be held?
That's a possibility. That would be a special election, and the city would bear the cost of that election.
So if there were nothing else on the ballot, a special election in March would cost the city upwards of
$150,000 to $200,000.
several $100,000 if there's nothing else on the ballot at that time.
That's an estimate, but yes.
So the next election that we know that will occur, and we're pretty certain it will occur, is in May, the primary.
Yes, ma'am.
And that would be an easy date to tag onto.
Yes, ma'am.
With a municipal judge election. So anyway, that's beyond the discussion for today. So I would propose, without objection, a motion for a question. It's my understanding that a presiding officer who's not the elected presiding officer can make a motion.
No, ma'am. You're acting as the mayor right now, so you are basically the tiebreaker. You would only vote in case of a tie on a motion.
In that case, I'll relinquish the chair to, who's the last pro tem? Councilmember Wynn.
I'm not taking the chairs.
Councilmember Wynn declines to preside over this portion of the meeting. Councilman DiPolito. Do we change places, I guess? Shall I go back to my regular chair?
Is there anything I need to formally do to insert myself as Mayor Pro Tem? I guess at this point, is there any further discussion before we entertain a motion? If there's no discussion, I will entertain a motion at this time. Councilmember Price.
Yes, I'd like to propose a language for a referendum to be placed on the ballot of November 5th, the municipal election at no extra cost to the citizens of Roswell, with the following wording. Question, which do you prefer for the position of Roswell Municipal Judge? The choices would be A or B. A, retain the current system according to the City of Roswell Charter, whereby the municipal judge is elected directly by its citizens, or B, petition the Georgia legislature to amend the City of Roswell Charter to appoint its municipal judge as allowed in Georgia Code.
Councilmember Price, if you would repeat that just to make sure everybody has
Yes, the question is, which do you prefer for the position of Roswell Municipal Judge? A, retain the current system according to the City of Roswell Charter, whereby the municipal judge is elected directly by its citizens, or B, petition the Georgia legislature to amend the City of Roswell Charter to appoint its municipal judge as allowed in Georgia Code.
We have a motion. Do we have further discussion on the motion or questions on the motion? Councilmember Diamond.
What I'm seeing a number of municipalities do is a judicial nominating commission. Do we not need to address that as a third option? I mean, that's a direction that I would like to have discussion on, because I think that gives you that middle area and unrelated people who have an interest but not a direct interest in who the judge is.
Mr. Davidson, is that an option for the city?
The city could elect to do that. I don't know if it would be appropriate to put on the ballot. I don't know how that...
But I guess the question is, if we're going to ask a question one or the other, that that's not really, if we decide to go a third route, that doesn't really address that in the voters. If the voters aren't given that as an option, then we're not getting the full picture.
The voters are not going to make the decision. This is non-binding, so it's just a question. So the council could
I just
form
think
a
that
committee.
skews the conversation when you only have two choices on the ballot for a poll, and there's quite a few more options than that.
Are we aware of any other cities that use that format?
I found quite a few yesterday, but I'd have to go back and...
But you're not asking to have that put on the ballot.
Yeah, well, I just think that needs to be... If we're going to consider all the options, we need to give the voters all the options to consider, and...
Councilmember Diamond, are you proposing an amendment to the motion?
No, I guess I'll leave it alone, because I just don't see how this is going to work.
Do we have any discussion regarding Councilmember Diamond's suggestion? Councilmember Price.
I think that falls in the realm of appointed, because it would be through the mayor and council to appoint that entity, and I don't think we'd be electing those people directly. So I think it still boils down to an election versus an appointment. And those, I think, are the broadly two categories, and the suggestion that you're mentioning, which sounds like a reasonable one, probably falls within option B.
Well, I think...
Councilmember Price, could you reread your language for option B?
Petition the Georgia legislature to amend the City of Roswell Charter to appoint its municipal judge as allowed in Georgia Code, because the Georgia Code does allow us to appoint judges. We happen to have a charter, though, that stipulates that we have an elected judge.
So your language doesn't specifically exclude what Councilmember Diamond's suggestion is to have a committee. Would you concur with that, Mr. Davidson?
I would. I think if that's what she was meaning.
I just think that's a flaw in the, I'm sorry, I wasn't right.
I think,
As
may I,
Councilmember Price?
yeah, may I point out something that, should we petition the Georgia legislature to change our charter, that will not be without cost, and a great deal of cost to get it to the point that the charter is amended. So once again, I feel like if we took this opportunity of the November election to put a poll on there, opinion poll, we might gather some interesting information, and it would be at no cost to the citizens of Roswell. And it would allow people to weigh in beyond the 6 or 7 of us to give their opinion on this matter. And which is not to say that we can't gather opinions all the time, we do. But I think it would be a great opportunity for people to directly, by their vote, tell us how they feel.
We have a motion. Do we have any other questions on the motion? Councilmember Diamond.
What is the cost to do, I mean, is there, we haven't heard that discussion yet either, but...
Technically, the city can go ahead and appoint a judge right now, so you don't have to amend the charter. That was just my recommendation, if you so chose to appoint, is to go in and change the charter so it's not conflicting with what your actual practice would be. The general law says that you can appoint a judge right now.
And is there a cost to amending the charter?
Cost of advertising?
Thank you.
There would be the cost of drafting the document, but would we do that in-house?
We would do that in-house.
Okay, so the costs are fairly nominal to amend the charter.
It would be advertising, yes.
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I had a separate point, but just as a side note to that, if we just did an appointment by state law, though, we would not be following our charter, because it does say we'll call for an election and then hold that election. So we do need to change the charter to be able to continue in that operation.
It would be my recommendation, which I put in my memo, to change the charter. However, it's not required because general law trumps the local
Right,
law.
I get that. That's just a side point. But the comment I did want to make, though, is I just have concerns about that wording that, again, it kind of stacks the deck that you can essentially keep things like they are, or we can go through all this trouble to make something different. And I think that's most people probably answer, let's just keep it like it is. So I'm not sure that goes into really explaining the whole situation. So again, I couldn't come up with, and all the things I'd looked through and thought through myself on how can make a fair question. So I can't support this wording.
For clarification purposes, the charter would not require amendment because state law essentially trumps the charter. So the council, mayor and council would have within their authority to appoint the judge. However, it would be your recommendation because the charter would then be contradictory to our practice to amend the charter.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Do we have another motion? Councilmember Price.
Yes. I have a new motion, proposed language for a referendum to be placed on the ballot for November 5th in conjunction with the municipal election at no extra cost to the citizens of Roswell, to pose the following question. Do you recommend that the mayor and council petition the Georgia legislature to change the city of Roswell's charter to adopt a process of appointing the municipal judge by the mayor and council rather than the current system of directly electing its municipal judge by the citizens of Roswell? And that would have a yes or no answer.
Do we have any questions on the motion? Do we have a second for the motion? Motion fails for lack of a second. We have another motion, Councilmember Price.
I do. Proposed language for a referendum to be placed on the ballot of November 5th in conjunction with the municipal election at no extra cost to the citizens of Roswell. Question. Which method of choosing Roswell's municipal judge do you prefer? A, by the current City of Roswell charter whereby the judge is elected directly by the citizens of Roswell. B, by changing the City of Roswell charter whereby the judge is appointed by mayor and council.
Do we have any questions on the motion? Councilmember Diamond.
I'm not hearing a difference.
Councilmember Price, could you
how is
explain the
that-
difference between your motions?
That was very similar to number 7.
Number 7?
I'm sorry, the first one I mentioned,
You
number
have
1.
7 motions to
I have 7 motions.
No, I am really behind. I mean, other than A and B versus, yes,
Councilmember Price, do you have those motions typed out in a format that would be helpful to distribute to the council?
I thought I emailed it to everybody.
I did not receive it. Did the council receive that?
Did you get it?
I propose we take a 5-minute break to make some copies, unless you have copies with you.
I do not, but I can make copies to distribute among...
Well, we can have our staff do that, but let's
Sure.
take a 5-minute recess to get the proposed motions copied so council can take a look at those and read through those. I think that'd be more productive than try to do this verbally. Thank you. 5-minute recess is concluded. I'll call the meeting back to order. Councilmember Price has distributed, or the staff has distributed on behalf of Councilmember Price, questions to the council that have been proposed. There are 7 questions that are actually included on the overhead for the public to view as well.
We can pull it up one at a time.
Can the public see the comments on the overhead? If somebody from staff could zoom in on these and we can go through them.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Michael, if you'll just do one at a time, because there's no way, I tried to blow it up, but there was no way to show them all at once.
We have already discussed items, or questions 1 and 2 that have failed for lack of a second. And 3 as well. Thank you for that. Councilmember Price, would you like to continue with question number 4? Councilmember Price.
I believe it's number 3 on the overhead, and the wording there is, do you support the current charter of the City of Roswell whereby its municipal judge is elected directly by the citizens of Roswell? And that would be a simple yes or no.
Questions, comments on the motion? Councilmember Price?
I guess we need to ascertain if we're just discussing wording at this point, or if we're discussing moving ahead with a referendum at all. So I guess I'll preface it with saying, if we moved ahead with a referendum, would this wording be appropriate in that referendum?
The wording for question number 3 or any of the
Well,
wording?
for this one in
If you'd like to make a general motion, which may be the best way to handle this, that we move forward with a referendum and we can discuss wording in various points, see if there's consensus on some of the wording, then we can handle that as a single motion.
Well, if we could just act upon that one, and then we'll maybe modify it going forward. So my motion is, do you support the current, to put on the ballot on the November 5th municipal election at no extra cost to the citizens of Roswell, the following question: do you support the current charter of the City of Roswell whereby its municipal judge is elected directly by the citizens of Roswell? Yes or no?
Do we have a motion? Do we have any questions on the motion? Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Do we have another motion?
We do.
Councilmember Price.
Proposed language for a referendum to be placed on the ballot of the November 5th municipal election at no extra cost to the citizens of Roswell. The following question: which method do you prefer for the citizens of Roswell to select their municipal judge? A, direct election by the citizens of Roswell, or B, appointment by the mayor and council to serve at their pleasure?
We have a motion. Do we have any questions or comments on the motion? Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Do we have another motion? Councilmember Diamond.
I'd like to make a motion that we initiate a full-scale education piece, including a web presence and input effort in the short term to get input from the citizens going forward, along with staff recommendations and information on what other places are doing, how these decisions were arrived at, and give us the background that we need to have that public discussion.
Councilmember Diamond, I don't believe that is an item on the agenda. I think it is direction for staff,
Okay.
which would be appropriate, and I agree with. But the question on the table for this meeting is whether we will have a question on the ballot. So while I agree with your suggestion, let's stick to the matter at hand.
Okay, maybe my question is in lieu of, because I don't see any wording here that doesn't seem skewed in one direction. That's just a comment, I guess, but I'm not comfortable going forward. And, to have 7 questions that look pretty much the same to me handed to us on the dais to make a decision this big, I'm not comfortable with.
So do you have a motion?
I guess not, if that's not within the realm of this discussion.
Well, if
Motion not to move forward at this time for lack of
so we have a
Second.
Let me try to clarify the motion. We have a motion to not move forward with a question on the ballot because there is a lack of consensus on language for the question. Is that an adequate summary of your motion?
That's an excellent summary of my...
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
I second your summary.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have questions or comments on the motion? Mr. Eichelhardt.
I guess I'm fine with the motion, but question from Mr. Davidson. Do we take a vote to not do something in this scenario?
Well, this meeting was called to discuss whether you wanted to put a referendum, a non-binding referendum on the ballot on November 4th. And so technically, I guess you can make a motion to.
Thanks.
And I want to make a comment that I think there is a lot of discussion on whether to even have a question. There also seems to be the secondary question of, can we come up with language that everyone is comfortable with? And at this point, that doesn't appear to be the case. Do we have any other questions or comments on the motion? Do we have public comment on the motion? Going once. No public comment. Public hearing is closed. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? That is Councilmember Diamond, Councilmember Nguyen, Councilmember Eichelhardt. All those opposed? Councilmember Price. This meeting is adjourned. Oh, I'm not adjourning the meeting. I'm going to turn it back over, to Mayor Pro Tem Councilmember Price.
Thank you, Councilmember DiPolito, for presiding as I made my motions that were not seconded or moved upon. At this point, I just want to clarify that there's no one on council who wishes to make a motion to proceed with any question on the fall election ballot. So is there any motion to put any question on the ballot on November 5th? Seeing no one that wishes to make such a motion, the purpose of this meeting has concluded, and I adjourn the meeting.